Okay, hello, dear viewers. Welcome to, I guess it would be session 9 of our deep dive into Lamentations of the Flame Princess. Um, we have reached what I think we've all been waiting for, a discussion of magic in Lamentations and how Lamentations of the Flame Princess addresses magic. However, I'm going to take a slight detour to sort of frame the conversation as we go further into magic. Um, I'm going to talk about the Book of Antithesis by Joe Bittman. I sort of feel like this is a good starting spot, and for reasons that will become clear as we, go through this discussion today. But also because there was a rather, I'm going to say, negative review of it that came out recently, and I kind of feel like, well, no, I don't kind of feel like the reviewer just missed the point, and I think this is sort of going to be a counterpoint. I hope clears things up. Um, so let's begin with uh, magic and Lamentations of the Flame Princess. So, quick overview. I've been saying this before, and again, this is to help frame our conversation. Magic and Lamentations of the Flame Princess serves a special function beyond a mere mechanical thing that one particular character class can do, and beyond what is typical in your average D&D setting. Okay, magic users and elves in Lamentations of the Flame Princess are not, you know, Elminster of Shadowdale. They're not Mordenkainen from Greyhawk. I think he's from Greyhawk. They are not hurling fireballs and blowing up mountains. They're, I suppose they could at some point, but generally speaking, they're doing something very different. A magic user in Lamentations of the Flame Princess, it's not a, a source for superpowers, but it is a path to power, and it comes at a cost. Magic is the source of the weird, the mysterious, and the horrific. It is a proper understanding of magic, I think, is critical to understanding how to run a Lamentations of the Flame Princess campaign or one shot or whatever. And we need to kind of revisit alignment. So in Lamentations, lawful characters believe that there's an order to the universe, that there's some sort of point to it all, and they're part of it. They're part of the grand plan or something. Whereas the chaotic characters see the opposite, that there is no order, that there is no meaning to it all, that it's just this maw, this darkness, this just chaos beyond this like veneer of order. Um, and anyone who wields magic, magic users and elves, have to be chaotic because they have to have been touched by magic. They have to have understood something about the true nature of our reality. And when I went back to look at the alignment section, the very last sentence of the chaotic entry says that some characters so aligned are desperately wish they were not. That's a very Call of Cthulhu, H.P. Lovecraft kind of concept there that you've touched upon and seen something that you wish you had not. And I've never thought about playing a magic user that way. They're usually very confident, very interesting, studious, like, oh, I'm going to look at the arcane and da 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 da. But imagine someone who's more like frightened by what they know and with great trepidation and reluctance open their spell book. I mean, that is very different from Elminster. Magic is scary, and it should assault our sensibilities and make us question our very understanding of reality. And that is why we're going to start here. What the heck is the Book of Antithesis? If you did not know what a role playing game was, if you did not know what Lamentations of the Flame Princess was, and certainly if you didn't know what this book was and you picked it up at a bookstore, you probably think it was some sort of satanic thing. It's filled with runes. It's got crazy images from Benjamin Mara. It it's written in a sort of perspective of like Anton LaVey talking about invoking Satan and the demons of hell and all this stuff, and it seems like a kind of instruction manual from antiquity and how to be a magic user. I'm sorry, a magus. Um, and you wouldn't be wrong to think, my God, what is this? And we'll get to the reason why later. But book essentially is the first half does present itself as a book of magic, and then the second half is an adventure. But I submit to you that both sections are not exactly what they seem. That there's something more going on here. And I think the key to unlocking that is the foreword by J.F. Martell. He is the co-host of a podcast called Weird Studies Podcast. He's also the author of Reclaiming Art in the Age of Artifice. It's my understanding Joe Bittman's a big fan of that podcast, and I guess the two of them have had conversations, so on and so forth. So anyway, he wrote this forward, and I think it's a very good place to start. And I have a quote here. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but all is ritual, all is play. And then at the bottom it says, I would add that all play is bound to become ritual, given that it always implies a stepping out of real life and a magical zone that becomes the whole of reality while play lasts. Um, for me, it is this book is a metaphor for explaining the esoteric aspects of role playing and like what's happening at the gaming table, and I think this forward really underscores that point. Um, so, looking into the book, the first part, practical game magic, goes into rituals that allows you to create this shadow world, your homebrew setting, and it talks about astral travel to that place. It talks about invoking demons and for me using NPCs, divination tools, and how to get you and your players into the right mindset for running your game session that day or the campaign over the course of many sessions. Again, I think a lot of it is metaphor for what we are doing. Goes into rituals and tools, notebooks, it calls a journal, stylus, a wand to help invoke things. And for me, that's a pencil. I sometimes wave it at people, I guess, but um, using miniatures or totems, and then of course a clarion is this thing that you would invoke at the beginning of gameplay to get everyone ready to go. Um, I'm not going to go into the details of any of this because I'm not into the occult. I don't believe in it. I think it's kind of silly. No disrespect to those who do find it, uh, you know, who do take it serious. I'm sure you have plenty of things to say about my Catholicism, uh, but I do think it's presented in such an authentic way it almost feels real. When you're reading it, which I think is a testament to Joe Bittman's writing capabilities. It's really good and kind of compelling, and understood as a metaphor. I mean, I can relate to it by saying, like, look, I do have my own rituals when I sit down and get ready for the game. Now, my online game, I have a ritual to get myself set up. I work from home, so I have to share, and I have a small office, so I have to share my desk with my gaming stuff when it's game day. And I have this ritual I do every single time, and it dawned on me in prepping for this video. I do it every single time. The the keyboard gets moved over to the particular spot on the desk. All the notes and stuff from work get piled a certain way and set aside to a specific spot in the room, and then I set up my laptop, my secondary monitor. I check OBS. I review the module and where I think the players might go, where I anticipate they're going to go, so I'm better prepared, and and then I log on to Discord and get everything set up. And I also have a Clarion. If you've been listening to my actual play, Lamentations of Elemental Evil, and God bless you if you are. Thank you. What do I do? Okay, hello, dear viewers. Welcome to episode blah 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 of Lamentations of Elemental Evil, and then I go into a recap. Um, and it's interesting. Like up until I click start recording on OBS and do that clearing, there's conversation going on amongst the players, and they talking about what their week and how they're doing and yada yada yada. And then I say, all right, I'm going to start recording, and then I do my clarion, and everyone is, you know, ready to go and they're focused. Um, do I invoke demons? Well, no. But if understood as sort of like invoking like these NPC character archetypes, I do kind of pace around my house when my wife is not around, and get into the headspace of my villains and the creatures and NPCs so I can better present them to the players so they seem more real. And I do think there is a ritualized aspect to that as well, especially when you use certain techniques, like what I've done with Grimag and Ranos Davel of Hamlet, that sort of builds in the minds of the players that there's these actual NPCs that seemingly exist at least for that momentary 2, 3, 4 hours of gameplay. In particular, going with the example, those were NPCs written by Gary Gygax, and I took ownership of them and kind of added my own thing. I can't reveal it because the players haven't quite figured it out yet. But if you've been listening to my actual play, I almost always say when they're around that there's this smell of a musty, earthy odor, almost like peat, and it's always present in the trading post, and it's always present with some of the cultists that they fought. So, but anyway, that has turned Grimag and Ranos Davel into like these villains that are very real in the eyes of my players. You guys won't see it, but in the Discord discussions after in between games, these guys come up. In fact, the player who plays Dagus likes to refer to them as the weirdos. What are we going to do about the weirdos? So do I invoke demons? No. Do I invoke very seemingly real NPCs? Yes. Um, the book goes into divination magic. Again, I'm not going to talk about the accuracy of it because I don't think it's relevant. Uh, but it talks about divination magic with like the throwing bones, throwing like trinkets and things that have specific meaning to you to help you determine what happens the next part of the adventure. And it goes into some detail about this, and it makes me wonder if Joe Bittman is getting at something here. Because this is an easy metaphor for rolling dice, right? But there's a section on dice magic, and there's a section on numerology, and there's another word for it, and I can't remember. Doesn't matter. So why this section if it's not exactly the same as dice magic? And it makes me wonder if the well, let me back up and say like this should clue you in that there's something more than just an edge lord's book of satanic magic. There's something really profound being expressed here. And it makes me wonder, is this book trying to teach you, the would-be game master, the would-be game designer, the would-be creative world, how to do it? Is the book of Antithesis about empowering you to create the games you want to play? Is this book really about the psychology of the tabletop role-playing game and our experience with them? I'm not going to answer those questions. I'm going to let you do it. But it really gets me thinking that there's so much more than just being dismissive and calling it an edgelord book. There's just something more going on here. Which turns me to the adventure. So, full disclosure, I have not played it, so I cannot attest to its playability. What I can say is that it is the application of what you've been reading up to this point. And it encourages you to use those techniques, those magical rituals, to play the adventure. I suspect that given the way the adventure is set up and the use of those techniques, the adventure has replayability, which is always a plus in my mind. This adventure is an adventure in the standard sense. There's no real plot, although there is something going on. It's more of a setting with some bare bones stuff to do with it, however you want. But there's no like dungeon maps and point locations. It's just like here's like the world map. Here's a bunch of towns. Here's like the main city, and here's some NPCs and that's it. Essentially, though, there is like this possessed child, an exorcism that goes wrong, and a potential adventure that leads the players to the literal gates of hell in an effort to rescue her. And along the way, they find the Book of Antithesis itself. And I'll get to that in a second. This adventure does not use a timeline, random charts, or points, or whatever. It uses something called resonances. Now, I'm not sure if that's a occult thing. It might be. I suppose I could have looked it up. I didn't. If you're an occultist and resonance means something, hey, let me know in the comments below. To me, though, I'm calling them motes of imagination, like these little seedlings of ideas that you can use or not to develop the venture as you see fit. And there are images that he's encouraging you to print out and show players and use. And even as you're prepping for the adventure, taking notes, just kind of going with your gut, what these might mean to you. Um, and you use the techniques contained in the first part of the book to figure out when to apply a resonance, when to use one of these resonances or not. Um, it's very different. Um, I guess the adventure takes place in the aftermath of Better Than Any Man, which is interesting. Um, and like I said earlier, there's some descriptions of stuff just to kind of give you a sense of the setting, but you also get NPCs, including Satan himself. He's got 666 hit points, folks. Um, I think there's a cool bestiary in it. It's got some neat stuff in it, including pregnant cannibal children. Wouldn't be Lamentations of the Flame Princess if there wasn't something kind of strange and jarring about the creatures, I suppose. Um, and then Benjamin Marra does the art, and it's absolutely amazing. But I really can't show you because it could probably get me in trouble on YouTube because I'm super popular and all that stuff. Uh, but but it's got like one image in particular that jumps out at me is like this demon with like an erect penis, and like this wizard is branding the penis, the tip of the penis. I get sympathy pains just looking at it, but it's some great art and very evocative and really helps sets the tone of like this demonic sort of thing that's going on in this area of Germany. Um, like I said, the Book of Antithesis is also an artifact within the adventure that the players can find, and it's used to create portals to other worlds. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, there's a hole cut out in the cover. That's the portal. And I guess the game rule is, the mechanic is, if your players who have the book are actually able to fit something through the hole, their character can get it. I guess Joe mentions that during one of the playtests, someone was actually able to put a revolver or something through the hole, like a small little gun. I don't, and there it was. So the Book of Antithesis is now working on multiple levels for this writing. Um, it's quite extraordinary, really. All right, some final thoughts. It is an I think this is an excellent place to start the discussion of Magic and Lamentations of the Flame Princess because of its controversial nature. It's controversial in the sense that it's going to offend every single Catholic and Christian out there, and maybe some Muslims and Jews too. It's satanic. Its presentation is satanic. It's got magic in it, and you might not believe in magic, or maybe you do. It's going to cause a fight, kind of argument, whether or not magic is real. It's controversial in the sense of the adventure that is not written in any standard way. It's actually somewhat avant-garde, um, and I think the controversial is a good place to find the weird and the mysterious, and sometimes the scary. So it only makes sense that this is where we start with a discussion of magic and Lamentations of the Flame Princess. If anything were to embody magic in Lamentations of the Flame Princess, it's probably this book. It really makes you question how you approach the game. It helps reinforce, again, if you take it as a metaphor, and you should, uh, it really helps you reinforce the concepts of immersion and how you do things, and maybe make you a better game master. Um, However, with that said, if you're a beer and pretzels type gamer, where you're just, you want to kill the goblins, steal the dragon horde, spend all your gold on beer and wenches at the local tavern, uh, and tell jokes with your buddies around the gaming table while rolling nerd dice, this book is probably not for you. So I would not recommend you spend your money on it. However, if you're like me and are really fascinated by the concept of immersion and really fascinated by what happens at that gaming table every time you get together with your buddies, I strongly recommend you get this book. I've been gaming for over 30 years, and I am still to this day constantly meditating on like what the hell happened. What the hell happened last week? How did that happen? Everyone was so into it. Like, how do I recreate that? There are a lot of GM advice books out there, and they're going to give you tips and tricks and tools. You got a lot of talking heads who have videos that are going to like, this is how I do this, and I'm not saying that's bad advice. Some of it's actually pretty good, but none of them have been adequate to really explain the tabletop role playing game experience. I think the Book of Antithesis, through metaphor, has done it, and I'm just going to leave it at that. Um, so to the counterpoint, like I said at the beginning of this video, there was a bad review, and I think that individual, all due respect, was completely off base. This is not a book of magic, not in the literal sense. It's again, I don't believe in that stuff. And I don't think it was intended to be that because it's talking about role playing games throughout the whole thing. I don't think Joe Bittman thinks that if you intone the actual words contained in one of these rituals, everyone's going to be instantly transported to Shadowdale and see Elminster. No, no, no. This is about ritualizing your gameplay so immersion happens. Um, and that's the magic of it, folks. That's the magic of it. It's part joke too, which I think is really smart. I think is actually very, very smart because what if the Satanic Panic were true? I mean, that's the Satanic Panic. Like what? That's sort of like the start of all this. Like, what if it was true and we were really summoning demons? Well, what a great way to like talk about immersion, talk about the ritualization of our gameplay through the use of some book of dark satanic magic, summoning Baphomet and Belial and the Leviathan and all this other stuff. What a great way to be, and I'm glad I'm part of the joke. I think it's hilarious. So yeah, I think, and forgive me, but I think it's pretty obvious that this was just a joke, but not like a ha ha slap your knee, fall on the floor, gasping for air type joke, but just like intellectually speaking, like yeah, we are kind of engaged in magic with our friends when we open up our D&D books, open up our Call of Cthulhu books, open up our Lamentations of the Flame Princess books, open up GURPS, open up whatever, and for a couple hours out of our day, we are transported from the bullcrap that is our day-to-day lives and get to play heroes and dastardly dudes and dudettes and fight demons and dragons and stuff. So in a way, it is magic, but not literally speaking. But I'm going to leave you with this. So I've done the $64,000 question whether you should buy it or not. but I'm going to leave you with this. What would happen if you actually use the book rules as written? Has anyone done it? If you have, leave me a comment. I'd be curious. I'd be curious. Um, all right, well, that's it for me, guys. I really appreciate y'all checking this out. If you like what you see and hear, hit like and subscribe, bell icon, yada, yada, yada. There's going to be more. I have some big plans for 2023 to kind of expand what I'm doing here because I'm starting to get the hang of it. In December, I'm going to do a Christmas one shot and review. And next week, we'll get started on a deeper dive of Lamentations of the Flame Princess, magic in terms of the mechanics. And I hope you stick with me. And with that said, I am currently drinking James E. Pepper 1776 straight rye whiskey, 100 proof.